You're telling the MIT story where you and Mom went to a convention.
MIT.
Oh, that story. Okay, this story is from the early part of the Southwest SIDS research program back in, must have been like 87 or so. And Patrick had gone to school. And so Patricia was now going to be home. And Judy had was doing sleep studies with strip charts because we had put together a multi-channel strip chart recorder from Dow with Z-fold paper. And so they were recording the sleep study, which was in those days about 4 or 5 channels.
So a channel means you're measuring something like
Yes, like
breathing, heart rate.
breathing or EKG or blood oxygen or pH in the stomach, pH in the throat. And so we were talking about that, and we had gotten some data acquisition boards, 8-channel data acquisition boards that we used to study a runaway chemical reaction at Dow. And so that meant that we had a $1,000 computer board that would record data at a good clip. And the IBM PCAT had come out, and that was a 6 megahertz 6 megahertz 286 computer. And I had one in my office, and I brought it home, and I took a screwdriver to the back of Kim's monitor, and Judy had a panic because I was taking apart the monitor. And so, but I told her I had to get to the signal. I had some clips to reach in and grab signal. And we proved that we could record data fast enough to do something useful on the EKG and the breathing. And so then the suggestion came out over a dinner conversation that we could automate the reading of the sleep studies, which was taking several hours to read a strip chart of a sleep study. And Judy was actually quite skeptical about this, but we had algorithms that we had gotten back in the 70s to look at photoelectron spectroscopy, and they were very good at peak finding. And so we had a peak finder, and then basically looking at breath data is basically peak finder data. And so I gave Patricia the algorithm, and she programmed it up in Microsoft Basic and demonstrated that it would in fact find breaths and lack of breaths, which was apneas, but that it was way too slow to be able to be functionally very useful because we had too much. We had about 6 megabytes of data, and you couldn't process that much in BASIC in a reasonable number of hours. So we went looking for a programming language that would be compiled and fast, and we found The original thought was Fortran, but Fortran compilers were $1,500. And we found Borland's programming language, which was really a very nice programming language. It was Turbo Pascal, and it was $50 a copy. And it was a very well structured language, which originally created for teaching. And so I said, well, Patricia can program it. And Patricia said, well, what? I said, well, you won't have to write, it won't be really complicated. You'll just have to string together some subroutines. And which is, of course, literally true, but ridiculously understates the fact that what she was going to develop was an artificial intelligence system for finding peaks and rejecting artifact and stuffing everything into a database and having a program that would allow somebody to do supervisory edits at a time when AI really wasn't very much of a game. And Judy was the expert, and Patricia captured Judy's rules in the software. And that started in about January. And then the next then basically they turned off the strip charts in September. And they're now doing the sleep studies entirely with the computer for both data acquisition and for data analysis. Patricia did the data acquisition as well as the data analysis programs and the information storage. And so they decided that they were going to go to the International Apnea Conference in Palm Springs in January. And so we loaded up, we were running on Hewlett Packard, we're running on Compact 286 suitcase computers. Basically a little green screen about yay big. And so you had a hard disk and you had memory and you had a 286 processor in a size of a small suitcase that weighed about, 15, 20 pounds. And so we flew out to California and we took the two computers with us. And so the part of the story that you're really wanting to get to starts to happen next. Because, so we set up in a booth to show off what we were doing. And we went in to see the first talk on Monday morning. And the lady from Massachusetts General Hospital linked up with Harvard and MIT was there, and they were talking about their 2-channel sleep study being done on a Data General PDP-11. And at the end of the talk, where she talked about the fact that they had been able to, find apneas and record them, and they said, well, what would really be good was if you could do a dump and make a distribution analysis of all the breath periods and all the heart rate periods, but that would just be too much. And so the talk ends and we break for the intermission, and Patricia decides that she's going to stay at the booth during the next session of the conference which lasted, I guess, an hour and a half, 2 hours, somewhere along there. And when we get back to the booth, she says, well, do you want to see it? And we, of course, said, see what? And she said, well, the lady said that what you really wanted to have was a distribution of breath periods and heart rates, but it was too complicated, and did you want to see the answer? And we allowed us to how that it would be nice to see the answer, and so she pops up the graph of the breath rates and the heart rates as a distribution function. We allowed us to how that was pretty impressive. And then the guy who did the programming for the Massachusetts people came by, and you know, as people do, they talk about, you know, I did this and I did that, and where did you go to school and where did you learn to program? And Patricia said what was rigorously true was, well, I read a book, and it's not the people from left field you have to worry about. It's the little old ladies from a town you never heard of in a place far, far away.
Very good.
Is that the story you wanted?
Yeah.
What? Say again?
What? How old were y'all at the time?
Well, Patrick was 7. And so this was 87, so we were about 40. She was older than I was by almost a year.